Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Thank you for joining us today on our Calibration Point Podcast. And today we have, once again, a guest that we've had in the past, Bill Stanczykiewicz from the Fundraising School, who is also Assistant Dean at the School of Philanthropy and Director of the Fundraising School at Indiana University on the School of Philanthropy. And Bill has been with us in the past, and we had phenomenal feedback, Bill, on the last podcast we did. I had so many comments from people just saying thank you for having Bill on and talking about engagement and how our board can be positioned. So that has led to our topic today in just wanting to explore this CARES Act and some of the changes that may benefit donors this year as they give to charitable organizations, and provide just some insight, Bill, on how the donor ought to think about this and what nonprofit organizations can do to help raise awareness for their donors in a way that the donor can see them as providing a benefit of knowledge to them that maybe they're not getting from a financial planner or from a CPA. So that is where we're going to journey on today. And Bill, I would just open up with a question in layman terms, and from your position with the Fundraising School especially, how do we translate these changes to a donor from what you've seen?
And there were two significant changes in the CARES Act. One is a universal charitable deduction of up to $300, regardless of anybody's income levels, and then raising the ceiling on charitable giving deductions related to adjusted gross income, AGI, from 60% of AGI to 100% of AGI. So these are two very significant changes that were not unsubstantial when we think about what this means in federal tax policy. We have not had a universal charitable deduction since the first half of the 1980s. The universal charitable deduction was part of the 1981 tax reform and went away in the 1986 tax reform and has not come back, despite the annual request from the philanthropic sector that a universal charitable deduction be placed back in. So one silver lining in this horrible situation with the pandemic is that the federal government, again, finally has realized the value of the universal charitable deduction. So this is important from a standpoint of federal policy and the recognition of the philanthropic sector, and can be a useful tool for donors, and obviously then, therefore, for fundraisers to be discussing with their donors.
Let's start on the universal charitable deduction and this $300 above the line deduction. How does that look for a donor? How does that play out in real time for them? Is that just whether they're filing any other deductions or not, they can just make that gift and now they have that universal deduction? What's the practical side of how that can look?
Yeah, so let's say that you make $100 in a year, just using a very simple number. You don't necessarily pay tax on that full $100. There are some of these, what you referred to, above the line deductions that we're able to take. And then what's left is your AGI, your adjusted gross income, and the federal government says that's what we're going to apply your tax rate to. So but the fact that this is a $300 universal charitable deduction that anybody can receive regardless of their income is basically going to, first of all, most importantly, help the nonprofit that you donate to. That's the first, second, third, and thousandth reason that you're doing so. But then you gain this tax benefit that you're reducing the overall number that the federal government is going to apply the tax rate to. So you have a chance to lower your taxes while also helping a charitable organization.
Do you believe, from what you've seen at the Fundraising School and just in your expertise with the School of Philanthropy as well, are donors starting to yet think about this? Do you think this is penetrating yet into donor mindset? Are you seeing any indicators there?
Really depends on the donor, Jamie. First of all, when we look at the study of taxes overall, when we do surveys of donors, taxes wind up very low on the list of reasons people say that they donate. But then what's very interesting, our economists then do some additional research And they're able to demonstrate when the taxes do change in ways that favor charitable giving, guess what? Charitable giving goes up. So people are saying one thing to the surveyors and doing another thing with their behavior that's caught by the economists. And so we do know that taxes can be an incentive. We still believe and teach that people give out of their values, give out of their motivations, a wide range of donor motivations that maybe I benefited before, and it's time to move things forward, to pass it forward. Maybe a member of my family has benefited in the past. All these different donor motivations are at play and often are primary, but there's no doubt that taxes are still in that mix. So that's number one when we look at history. What we look at now, Gallup just came out with some very interesting data just last week that demonstrated that only 30% of Americans have made a donation to charity during the pandemic for COVID-19 reasons. And so that percentage maybe is not as high as we perhaps would have thought it would have been when we look at data after a hurricane or an earthquake, a tsunami, these types of things. And of course, the pandemic is just in the first couple, 3-4 months. We'll see if that percentage changes over time. The other thing is who's donating. And when the average was 30%, nearly half of those donors have household incomes of $100,000 or more, and about 27% of them have household incomes of $40,000 or more. So again, it's generally speaking, the higher income households are currently donating to COVID. And of course, then, those are some of the donors, to the point about this discussion, who could benefit more greatly from the tax advantages that were put into the CARES Act.
That's fascinating. I had not seen that research, Bill. So thank you, for sharing that. Then kind of take that to the next step of this benefit equation, and that is the AGI adjustment. In kind of practical terms, how does that benefit the donor, and what does that look like compared to where they would have been, say, 2019 compared to 2020?
Great question without a very simple answer. So first of all, we're only deducting our charitable giving if our charitable giving and our other allowable deductions are greater than either $12,000 if I'm a single or $24,000 if I'm filing jointly as a household. And so for our wealthiest donors, that whole change in the standard deduction really did not affect them because their number was already above $24,000 to begin with. For our lower income neighbors, that change never affected them because they never got to the initial $12,000 to begin with, let alone to the $24,000. The donors most affected were those kind of in that mid-range, those donors who were donating to you $2,500, $5,000, $7,500, and doing so to one or two nonprofits. Where they crossed the $12,000 line, now they're not crossing the $24,000 line. So the tax incentive really went away, even when they added in some of those other things that could be deducted, like the mortgage on their homes and the cap up to $10,000 of their state and local taxes. Right. So that said, that's one piece on the deduction on who it affects and who it doesn't. But now this 60 to 100% does affect our wealthiest donors, because even those who could still take the deduction, the federal government has always said, yes, but only to a certain point, only up to 60% of your AGI. Well, now they're saying for 2020, this can be all of your AGI. Now, who can donate all of their AGI? Only somebody who has other wealth, right? Because basically we're saying they can donate all of their income for the year, right? Which means they must have stock holdings or other possessions, other wealth generators that they can utilize to buy their food and pay their light bill and everything else that they have expenses for. So this change especially affects our wealthier donors. But what's interesting then, when we lay that up against the Gallup data, the wealthier donors are the ones who are most likely to be donating right now during this pandemic. So it could add extra wind to the sail of those donors who are most likely to be giving during this current season.
I've also read, in essence, one can effectively, to your point, eliminate their tax burden for this year if they were to max out, and that if they needed to use that benefit, that they can carry the excess benefit forward into other tax years, depending on how high that benefit goes. Are you finding or hearing that organizations are starting to be proactive in educating their donors about these changes? And what are you seeing there in the field?
I think the time is now to do exactly that. As Leading Associates is recommending to their clients, it's something that the sector needs to be doing. I think the first couple, 3 months, and if you look at just crisis leadership overall, the first thing is we save lives. We protect lives of people. And then we also then secondly protect our stuff, protect our infrastructure, protect our money. And then thirdly, we think about protecting our reputation. That's just classic through the academic literature on crisis leadership. So first of all, the whole goal was, let's make sure we don't have more patients than we have hospital beds. Let's make sure we don't have more people who need a ventilator than we have ventilators. Now, at least through this first wave, it appears like we've had success, at least in the United States, in having that, barring some huge second surge of COVID infection. I think now people and donors were responding to those things right away. Donations to food banks and other human service organizations, which, by the way, donations to those types of nonprofits generally do increase during times of economic calamity, and we're seeing that right now. I volunteer, for example, at a food bank that serves where you and I both live in central and southern Indiana, and they have upwards of 5,000 brand new donors who they never solicited.
Wow.
We're just sending money to the food bank. Now that we're kind of in the first stages of the new normal, could be the good season to start talking about these more intricate issues associated with charitable giving. And we need to get moving, because this only applies to 2020, at least for now. We'll have to watch the federal legislation that continues if any new bills and any new laws come to be. But now's the time to start having those more intricate conversations with our donors while we still have time to do so in the calendar year 2020.
Great point. So now's the time to begin educating and raising awareness. And for both of these, correct? For the $300 universal and for those that the increase in AGI might apply to. You know, something I hear a lot in the field, Bill, and I just ask you to speak to it from kind of your position and thinking from the Fundraising School and the School of Philanthropy, is often I'll hear donors that will say, or clients that will be concerned that, well, if I educate my donors about these things, isn't that self-serving? And my response to them is, if I love cats, I want to love cats. And if you have extra benefits that allow me to do that even more, why wouldn't you make sure that I'm aware of it? Do you see that in the Fundraising School or in your role in the School of Philanthropy, where organizations are starting to accept that, yeah, we are and can be a proactive resource for the donor, even though we may not be their CPA or their financial planner, but we can still raise awareness and do that in a way that builds trust?
You know, Jamie, absolutely. And nonprofits, by their nature, are saying we believe we can make the world a better place.
Right.
That at its foundation is a message of hope. And if there's anything that we need now more than ever, are positive messages and messages of hope. And so certainly we can be bringing those to our donors. We can be, certainly with great sensitivity, that their household might be affected by the disease. That's the most important thing, that somebody's been ill or tragically we've lost a loved one to COVID-19. Second of all, their household, their finances might be challenged, and we need to be sensitive to that. And then once we've crossed those bridges, we're telling them we still are taking care of the cats, to your example.
Right.
We still are the one who's championing the arts, and the arts can touch people's hearts in unique, profound ways that other things can't. And that's why the arts are still important, let alone those direct health and human service and educational and faith-based and other organizations that are making a real difference. You're still doing your donor a favor when you bring them this information, let alone this technical information related to federal tax policy. And, you know, Jamie, you asked anecdotally, 3-4 months into this, as I've done several different sessions around the country, and I know you meet at least as many, if not more people than I do. I've yet to have the fundraiser say to me, I had a donor get upset with me that I got in touch with them during this time. Not one. And I always ask the question, and it's usually just the opposite. People are like, no, actually, I reached the donor and they increased their gift. I reached the donor and they asked me how I could help. I heard from the donor before they heard from me. Those are the stories we're hearing. So people, as you know, our founder, Dr. Henry Rosso, said, we always fundraise with pride. We always fundraise with confidence. We never fundraise with apology. And COVID can do some things, but it can't take that away. We can always have that with great sensitivity and empathy to our donors to still fundraise with pride, knowing that we're helping them enjoy fulfillment. We're helping them enjoy the joy of giving, especially during these challenging times of the coronavirus crisis.
Well, I think that you just laid out the message for the Fundraising School. That's beautiful, Bill. I'm glad I got it recorded. You're absolutely right. It's a great place to end on, and that we do bring a message of hope, and we should never feel like we have to apologize for that hope.
Well, I took great notes when you taught me.
No, you're so funny. Bill, I'm so thankful for your time today, the insight you bring, your service to the sector through the Fundraising School and the School of Philanthropy. You're a great blessing on so many levels, and just very appreciative of your time. So thank you.
Jamie, thanks for making the world a better place. Be well.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.